Inspirational speech. A table for two, please. There are moments in life that are louder than words, and sometimes rejection becomes a stage for redemption. He walked in slowly, neatly dressed, not in a tailored suit, but in a modest blazer. He held his daughter's hand. She wore her best dress, pink ribbons, and hope in her eyes. They had saved for this day. It wasn't just dinner. It was a memory being built with coins of sacrifice. But the hostess barely looked up. "Sir, we have a strict dress code and a reservation. Only policy." Her tone was clinical, rehearsed. He nodded, understanding. Yet his little girl didn't. "Daddy, didn't you say we could eat here today, like Mommy used to?" He knelt, smiled at her, kissed her hand. "We'll find somewhere even better, okay?" But she knew, and he knew. What they didn't know was that someone else had been watching. A man who had built empires, eaten at every fine dining establishment around the world, yet had never felt so alone. A man with a name that opened doors, yet couldn't open the one that truly mattered. The door to his wife's voice, now gone. He had come to the restaurant that night not to eat, but to remember. His table for one was always for two in his heart. Until he saw them. Until he saw himself years ago, before the fortune, before the fame, when love still lived in every corner of a cheap apartment. He stood up, walked toward them outside. "Excuse me," he said to the father. "Would you both honor me by joining me for dinner? I insist. The food here is good, but I think your company would make it extraordinary." There was hesitation, pride danced with humility, but love stepped forward. That night, they sat together, a millionaire, a widower, a single father, a daughter with dreams, and something miraculous happened. The restaurant, usually reserved for the elite, was filled with laughter, crayons on napkins, and conversations not about stocks, but about bedtime stories, ballet, and missing someone who isn't coming back. The millionaire paid the bill, but it wasn't charity. It was a transaction of the heart. He gave kindness, they gave connection, they were all richer for it. Educational message life teaches us in moments we often overlook. You may have everything and still feel empty, or you may have little, yet carry the kind of wealth that can feed souls. Don't judge too quickly. The man in simple clothes may be a king of love. The child beside him may be the only reason he wakes up. And when you can, be the person who makes room at your table, because someday you'll need someone to sit at yours too. Kindness doesn't cost, it returns. And sometimes a table for two is all it takes to feed three broken hearts. The value of dignity over status is a profound lesson often overlooked in our fast-paced, image-driven world. In a society where appearances and material possessions tend to determine how people are perceived and treated, we lose sight of what truly defines a person: their character, their resilience, their intentions, and their heart. Dignity is not about the car someone drives, the clothes they wear, or the number of zeros in their bank account. It is about the quiet strength someone shows in adversity, the grace with which they navigate rejection, and the respect they extend to others regardless of their background. And often, the people who embody the greatest dignity are those who have had to fight the hardest for even the smallest things. Consider the man who walks into a luxurious space, not flaunting wealth, but holding the hand of his child with pride. He may not wear designer labels or boast an expensive watch, but his posture, his eyes, and the way he shields his child from disappointment show something more refined than any luxury brand could offer. That is dignity. It is silent, unshakable, and deeply human. When someone is turned away because they don't look the part, we are not just rejecting their appearance, we are dismissing their story, their journey, and their humanity. Children are particularly vulnerable in these moments. They learn not only from what we say, but from what we do. When a little girl sees her father being denied a seat at a table, she is not just witnessing an instance of exclusion, she is absorbing a message about worth, class, and where she does or does not belong. However, when that same father kneels down to reassure her with love in his voice, when he chooses not to make a scene, when he lifts her spirit with his calm strength, she sees a different message. She sees that dignity means holding your head high even when the world looks down on you. That message can shape the rest of her life. On the other side, Those who uphold social status as a measure of respectability are often unknowingly impoverishing themselves. They miss the chance to meet extraordinary people who may not shine on the surface but burn bright inside. A single father might not have wealth, but he possesses patience, sacrifice, and relentless dedication, qualities that money cannot buy. When we look beyond the exterior, we discover the rich tapestry of human experiences that inspire us, teach us, and remind us of our shared vulnerability. Dignity over status also challenges us to reconsider the spaces we create in our society. Are our restaurants, schools, workplaces, and communities welcoming only to those who fit the mold? Or are they places where the soul is seen before the shoes? Every time we choose inclusion over exclusion, every time we make room at the table for someone who doesn't look like they belong by society's narrow standards, we create a more compassionate and truthful world. True strength lies in those who maintain their self-respect in the face of disrespect. The single dad who refuses to let rejection define him. The child who learns to smile again because her father protected her innocence. These are quiet heroes. And the man who extends a hand to lift someone up, who uses his influence to amplify kindness rather than ego. He demonstrates that real prestige is not worn, it is lived. When we begin to honor dignity over status, we begin to see each other not as classes or categories, but as people, with stories, with grief, with dreams. We begin to teach the next generation that they are enough, regardless of what they wear or own. And most importantly, we begin to heal the hidden wounds caused by years of exclusion and judgment. The heart recognizes what the eye often misses. And when dignity walks into a room, it needs no spotlight. It simply needs a seat at the table. Parenting as a silent sacrifice is one of the most profound truths in life, especially when it comes to single fathers who often remain in the shadows of appreciation. Society tends to overlook them, framing caregiving as something more naturally expected of mothers, while fathers are often cast as providers alone. But when a man takes on both roles, provider and nurturer, protector and comforter, he becomes a quiet warrior navigating a battlefield that few truly understand. He doesn't wear his sacrifices on his sleeve. He doesn't announce his exhaustion. He simply keeps going because his child needs him to. The world rarely pauses to see the father who wakes up before dawn to pack lunches, who checks homework at night with tired eyes after a long shift, or who learns how to braid hair or sew a costume because his child asked him to. He does not complain when he cancels plans, skips vacations, or eats less so that his daughter can have more. His reward is not public praise or applause. It's the quiet smile of his child, the soft "I love you, Daddy," whispered just before bed. That's where his heart finds its rest, in the smallest moments of connection that most people miss. When a father loses his partner, the emotional toll is immense, yet the world expects him to carry on, to be strong, to not cry too loud or grieve too long. But behind that strength is a sea of silent struggle. He doesn't just miss his spouse, he fears failing their shared dreams. He worries about whether he can raise their child to be kind, confident, and whole. And yet, despite the fear, he shows up, every single day. He ties shoelaces with trembling hands and builds bedtime routines from scratch. He learns to be both the steady discipline and the warm hug. That balance is no less than a daily act of heroism. Parenting alone means giving up parts of yourself to build something better for someone else. The single dad may forego dating, rest, hobbies, and personal ambitions, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. He measures success not by career milestones, but by his child's laughter, their safety, and their growth. And when he is rejected or judged, perhaps for not being affluent, for not appearing polished, or for bringing a child into a place considered adult, it hurts. Not because of his pride, but because he knows how much it took just to get there. How many nights he worked extra hours. How many times he whispered encouragement to himself just to make it to the next morning. And still, he remains gentle. This kind of parenting is not loud. It is not always celebrated, but it is powerful. Every act of quiet sacrifice adds up to a future where his child feels deeply loved, seen, and supported. These fathers are not asking for recognition. They are simply trying to keep their promises, trying to give their children a life filled with joy, dignity, and love, even if it costs them everything. What makes their journey even more admirable is the grace with which they carry the weight. A single dad doesn't often have someone to come home to and vent his frustrations. His fears often remain unspoken. His dreams are quietly folded away in drawers behind more pressing responsibilities. And yet, he keeps going, he smiles through the pain, he keeps showing up. He is the embodiment of quiet strength. In a world quick to celebrate showy success, these fathers remind us that the greatest victories are often unseen. They show us that love doesn't need a stage, it lives in the small things, in packing school bags, attending dance recitals, or simply sitting by their child's side during hard times. Their sacrifices shape strong, compassionate children. Their love, though often invisible to the world, becomes the foundation of someone else's entire life. So when we think of parenting, let us expand our definition. Let us remember the single father, the man who gives his all, silently and selflessly, so his child never feels the absence of anything, but instead grows up surrounded by everything that truly matters. Judgment versus understanding is a line that divides two very different ways of moving through the world. One is quick, reactive, often built on assumptions and surface impressions. The other is slow, patient, and rooted in empathy and compassion. In daily life, people make hundreds of decisions based on appearance, tone, or reputation. Someone walks into a room wearing clothes that don't match the standard of the place, and suddenly, they're deemed unworthy. A person speaks with a certain accent or hesitates when speaking, and instantly, conclusions are drawn about their intelligence or background. This is the nature of judgment. It's fast, shallow, and often unfair. Understanding, however, takes time. It requires effort. It asks people to look beyond the surface and to consider the story behind the moment. It means recognizing that everyone is fighting battles others can't see. When a single father walks into a restaurant holding his child's hand, dressed modestly, maybe even nervously, judgment sees an outsider. It sees someone who doesn't belong, but understanding sees something else. It sees love, effort, and courage. It sees someone who has likely sacrificed a lot to create this special moment for his child, someone trying to give them joy in a world that often doesn't make room for people like them. We all carry lenses shaped by our experiences, upbringing, and biases, but these lenses can either distort the truth or help us see more clearly. When we judge, we close the door on deeper human connection. We decide who someone is based on a glance, a title, a brand. When we understand, we open that door wider. We invite people in, not because they impress us, but because we recognize that every person has value beyond what we immediately see. In professional spaces, this lesson is crucial. A person applying for a job might not have the perfect resume or the polished look expected, but perhaps they have a story of resilience that has taught them more about dedication and work ethic than any formal degree ever could. In schools, a child acting out might not be disrespectful. They might be hungry, scared, or grieving. In relationships, someone's silence might not mean disinterest. It could mean they are overwhelmed with emotions they don't yet know how to express. Understanding starts with a pause. It begins when we resist the urge to label someone too quickly and instead ask, what might this person be going through? It's about giving others the benefit of the doubt, about listening before responding, and about choosing kindness over critique. When a waiter turns away a father and child because they don't fit the expected image of a high-end customer, they're operating on judgment. But when someone else at a nearby table invites them in and offers to share the experience with them, they're choosing understanding. And that choice has the power to transform not just a dinner, but a life. The world would be a radically different place if people replaced judgment with curiosity. If, instead of assuming they know who someone is, they asked to learn more. If, instead of closing doors, they asked how they could open one. True understanding doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or avoiding standards. It means recognizing the humanity in others before making conclusions about them. Sometimes, all it takes to change someone's entire day, or even their life, is one person who sees them for who they really are, not for what they seem to be. One person who treats them not as a mistake or a burden, but as a human being deserving of respect and dignity. That kind of recognition is powerful, it heals, it uplifts, and that's why understanding will always be greater than judgment. It doesn't just change how we see others, it changes how we move through the world. It makes us gentler, wiser, more patient, and more connected. Because in the end, everyone just wants to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood, not for what they wear or what they own, but for who they truly are inside. Grief hidden in silence is one of the most painful forms of sorrow because it exists behind smiles, behind everyday responsibilities, and behind the image of strength. When someone loses a partner, especially a spouse with whom they've shared a life, memories, and dreams, the world changes instantly, but not everyone sees it. The dishes still need to be washed. Bills still need to be paid. Children still need to be comforted. And so, grief does not always look like tears. It often looks like someone showing up, doing what needs to be done, all while carrying an invisible weight that never really lifts. Many people assume that time heals grief, but time only teaches people how to carry it differently. For a widower, especially a father, the grief is not just about losing a loved one. It's about learning to live without the emotional partner who helped carry the weight of life. It's about facing birthdays, anniversaries, school events, and simple dinners without the person who made those moments whole. He becomes both the strong shoulder and the one needing comfort, but there's often no one to lean on. So, he buries the grief, not because it's gone, but because life demands he move forward. Grief in silence is especially common among men, who are often taught from a young age to be stoic, to stay strong, and to avoid vulnerability. Crying is seen as weakness, talking about pain is discouraged, and so, many widowers walk around with full hearts and empty words. They smile for their children, they work hard to maintain stability. But inside, they feel a deep ache, one that never completely fades. They talk about her less, not because they've forgotten, but because the words feel too heavy. Because every time they try to explain the loss, it reopens the wound. In public, he may seem composed. People might even admire him for being strong or doing well, but they don't see the nights he sits alone at the kitchen table, staring at the chair that used to be filled with laughter. They don't hear the quiet apologies whispered into the dark, wishing he could have done something differently. They don't witness the way he holds his child just a little tighter, because she is the last living piece of the love he lost. What makes silent grief even more complex is that it's often misunderstood. People think moving on means forgetting, but for the grieving, it means remembering without breaking. It means learning to live with the absence, to keep the memory alive while still creating a future. And when a widower chooses to do something as simple as take his daughter to a nice restaurant, it's never just about food. It's about reclaiming a tradition, trying to create a new memory in a space where an old one once lived. It's about holding on to something that still connects them to the one who's gone. And when rejection happens in such a moment, when someone turns them away or treats them as less than worthy, it cuts deeper than most people realize. It's not just a denied reservation, it's a denial of a moment he fought hard to create, a moment that took strength, hope, and emotional courage. That rejection can remind him that the world doesn't see the battles he fights. It can reinforce the loneliness he already feels. Yet even in that pain, many grieving people continue forward. They love more deeply. They protect more fiercely. They appreciate the little things in ways others can't understand. And all of this happens quietly. They don't need sympathy. They need space to be real, to grieve in their own way, to be allowed moments of vulnerability without judgment. Grief doesn't always speak loudly. Often, it whispers through steady actions, through the effort to smile, through a father's love that becomes both a tribute and a promise, to never let the memory fade, and to raise his child with all the love left behind loneliness at the top. is one of the most misunderstood and overlooked emotional realities in modern life. People often associate success with happiness, assuming that if someone has wealth, recognition, or influence, they must be fulfilled. But the truth is far more complex. Being at the top, whether in business, fame, or status, can often be a place of deep isolation. The higher someone climbs, the fewer people they find who truly see them, not for what they have, but for who they are. Success changes the way people treat you. For many who achieve material wealth or public admiration, interactions become transactional. Conversations shift from authentic connection to networking or personal gain. People begin to expect generosity without gratitude, presence without care, and decisions without room for vulnerability. Over time, this creates emotional distance, not because the successful person wants it, but because they don't know who they can truly trust. They begin to wonder who would stay if all this were gone. A widowed millionaire, for example, might live in a house full of beautiful things, art, furniture, technology, but none of it speaks to him the way his wife once did. He might dine at the finest restaurants, travel first class, and have every material comfort available, but still go home to silence. The laughter, the warmth, the ordinary moments of love, these cannot be bought or replaced. And when that love is lost, the emptiness becomes louder than ever, even in the grandest spaces. The mansion becomes a shell. The success, once shared, now feels hollow. This kind of loneliness is made worse by the fact that it's invisible. People assume that those with wealth or status don't have problems worth acknowledging. What could they possibly be sad about? Others might ask, but grief doesn't check bank accounts, and loneliness doesn't avoid luxury. In fact, for many, it is success itself that builds walls. When you're seen as someone who has everything, people forget you might still be missing the one thing that matters most: human connection. There's also the fear of being seen as weak. A man who has built a name for himself in business, who is respected and even envied, might feel pressure to keep up that image. Showing pain, admitting to feeling alone, or expressing deep emotional need might feel like betraying the persona others expect. So he keeps his heart guarded, he smiles in public, he shakes hands, makes deals, and plays the part. But when the crowd fades and the doors close, he sits alone with memories that no applause can replace. And yet, these are the very people who often give the most when they find someone real. Because they know what it feels like to be surrounded by everything and still feel like something's missing. When they see a struggling father or a child being raised with love instead of wealth, it reminds them of what they've lost or perhaps never had. It softens them. It makes them want to connect, not through status, but through shared humanity. That's why a lonely man with every luxury might reach out to a stranger, not out of pity, but out of recognition. He sees something familiar, a love that money can't create, a moment he remembers once having, long before the suits and headlines. True connection doesn't require wealth. It requires presence. And when a wealthy, grieving soul offers a seat at his table to someone society might overlook, it's not just an act of generosity. It's a cry for something deeper. It's a quiet hope that maybe, for one evening, he won't be alone, that the child's laughter will echo through his silence, that the father's quiet strength will remind him that there's still something sacred in the simplicity of love. Loneliness at the top isn't solved by more success. It's healed by moments of truth, by the courage to be vulnerable, and by choosing to be human in a world that often forgets how. And sometimes, healing begins by simply inviting someone in. Kindness is the bridge between strangers, the silent language that speaks louder than wealth, status, or appearance. In a world often divided by assumptions, prejudices, and invisible lines drawn by society, one act of kindness has the power to cross all boundaries. It doesn't need to be grand or theatrical. It can be as simple as offering someone a seat, sharing a smile, or opening a door. Kindness doesn't measure what someone looks like or where they come from. It sees humanity first, and in moments when people feel rejected, unseen, or diminished, kindness becomes not just a virtue, but a lifeline. When someone witnesses unfairness, like a father and child turned away because they don't fit the image of a high-end place, It's easy to walk away, to stay silent. But choosing kindness in those moments means choosing to acknowledge pain and doing something about it. It means being the person who doesn't follow the crowd's indifference. It means standing in the gap and saying, "You matter." That simple gesture can restore someone's sense of dignity, even if just for a moment. It can change the emotional direction of a day, a week, or even a life. People underestimate the emotional depth that small kindnesses can reach. A child who sees someone show compassion to their parent will never forget it. That moment imprints on them a powerful belief that there are good people in the world, that love exists even outside the walls of their home, and that they are worthy of being seen. And for the parent, who might feel the weight of the world on their shoulders, kindness from a stranger is a breath of fresh air in a life that may feel suffocating with responsibility. It is the moment where they are no longer invisible. They are no longer alone. Kindness doesn't need an invitation or a perfect situation. Often, it is needed most when circumstances are messy, emotions are raw, and people feel undeserving. That is what makes kindness so radical. It enters when no one expects it. It shows up for the person who looks out of place, who isn't part of the in crowd, who has been told by the world they don't belong. And by showing up, it changes the narrative. It rewrites the ending. What's truly profound is how kindness creates a ripple effect. The person who receives it is often moved to pass it on. A millionaire who shares his table with a struggling father is not just offering a meal. He's offering warmth, humanity, and hope. And the father, touched by that gesture, may later do something equally compassionate for someone else. The child, watching all of this unfold, grows up understanding that the world can be kind, even when it's hard. This is how we build better societies, not through systems alone, but through daily, individual choices to care. It takes courage to be kind in a world that rewards indifference. It's easier to turn a blind eye, to believe it's not our place, or to assume someone else will do the right thing. But real kindness isn't passive, it's active. It notices the unspoken struggles. It listens when no one else does. It chooses involvement over distance. And when that kindness is given without expecting anything in return, it becomes pure. Sometimes the greatest acts of kindness are quiet. No camera, no applause. Just one person seeing another and offering what they can. Time, empathy, presence. Those are the moments that restore our faith in each other. They remind us that love doesn't need a title, compassion doesn't need credentials, and connection doesn't require status. All it needs is a heart willing to act. In the end, we may forget many details about people, what they wore, what they owned, what they achieved, but we never forget how they made us feel. That is the true legacy of kindness. It lingers in memory. It shapes character. It binds strangers into a shared story, and sometimes it all begins with a simple decision to welcome someone, to listen, and to say without words, "You belong."